Hello, this is Amber Rain Davis. Welcome to my YouTube channel and blog at notableink.com. Today I'm going to be making two cards for the Level 2 Altenew Educator Certification Program. These cards are inspired by the impressive heat embossing class at Altenew Academy. Today we'll be using Altenew's Bold Alpha die set, the Halftone Circles nesting die, the Halftone Circles stamp set, the Halftone Circles Thanks die, and the Hug Sentiment from the Watercolor Dots stamp set. We're going to start by creating an ink smooshed background with 3 Altenew Crisp Dye Ink mini cubes in Lavender Fields, Parrot, and Lagoon inks. So I'm just taking each cube and smooshing it on a couple times. That Lagoon color is one of my favorites, which is why it got a little more ink than the other ones used. So once that is smushed onto a craft mat, I'm just going to spray it with some water. In order to pick up the pigments today, I'm just using a stamp sleeve. So I have an A2 size card panel here, and this is just Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock. If you were going to be using a lot more water than this, then I would suggest watercolor paper, which can take more water. However, I wasn't using a whole lot of water at any given time, so this cardstock held up just fine. So I'm just doing some random patterns on there, pressing a little bit. You can see on the right-hand corner of the card that the green and purple started to mix. So I'm going ahead and I'm going to dry this layer of ink that's already on the card and add some additional purple. Since the other colors are dry, the purple and the green won't mix. There's a little too much yellow in that green, and when it mixes, it creates that brown. So in order to mask some of that brown coloring, I'm just going to add some additional Lagoon to the card and also to some different areas so that we've got a better balance between the green and the blue. I'm going to use the Bold Alpha die to spell many here. I'm just lining that up with my T-square ruler. And I'm going to cut the background and also a white piece of cardstock at the same time so that they're in the same place. We're going to do some heat embossing now, and I'm using my grid mat to line up the card and my post-it note tape here. I want to add a thin stripe of embossing powder across the card. So it's going to go across the negative space, the white card panel, and also on the letters to create a continuous stripe across the back. You just want to make sure that you press down your post-it note tape well. The post-it note tape will actually hold the letters into the negative cardstock as well. And once that's placed, we'll go ahead and ink it up with Versamark ink. And today I'm going to be using Ranger's Platinum Embossing Powder. This color is absolutely beautiful. It is a perfect combination of a little bit of silver, a little bit of gold, and it typically goes with any project, whether it's warm or cool tones. So we're just going to heat emboss that. Make sure that your heat tool is properly warmed up so that you don't get much warping to your cardstock. You can see that this melted very quickly. I have just a little bit of bubbling on the end there, so I'm going to ink that up again with some Versamark ink, add a little more powder, and melt that down so it's nice and smooth like the rest of the card. I try to pour my powder back in as I go. I have a tendency to blow the powder all over the place with my heat tool if I don't take care of that in between. So we're going to peel that away, and it looks just wonderful. I love the way that this turned out. So just be careful when you're pulling off this side because again it was holding those letters into place. And so you can see that just looks great. And so now we need to add a sub-sentiment. So we're going to be using the Halftone Circle Thanks die. I've cut that out of cardstock and then I stamped on it with the Versamark ink. The reason I cut the die cut out first is because I didn't want to run the embossing through the die cut machine. I find that that generally will take away some of the shine. I didn't get quite all of the corner there, so I'm just using a Versamark pen to add some additional ink, and I wanted more embossing here, a thicker layer, so I just outlined that with the pen and embossed that again. So now I've cut some letters out of foam, fun foam, with the adhesive back. When you take off the release paper, it stretched out the M a little bit. You can kind of see that the bottom of the M of the fun foam sticks out past the die cut. So instead of taking off the rest of the release papers, what I decided to do was go ahead and put adhesive, this is 1.5-inch score tape, on the back of the letters there. And I'll go ahead and put the foam pieces into that versus taking off the paper first. That'll prevent them from stretching, and it'll make sure that the die cut letters fit perfectly on there. I went ahead and took the adhesive off of the M so that the foam could retract a little bit and not be stretched out by the time I'm ready to put that into the reverse piece there. I used green to just add a little extra pop of color when you're looking at the card from the side. If you prefer white, you could use white fun foam, or you could also just stack 4 to 5 cardstock pieces. So for the thanks die, what I'm showing you there is I did use cardstock for this piece. I cut 3 more pieces of cardstock and I glued those 3 pieces together and then cut it in half lengthwise so that it's only popped up on the bottom half of the sentiment, because the top half is sitting on those foam pieces. It doesn't need to be popped up. So just gluing that in with some Tombow Mono Multi-Adhesive. And there it is, a clean and simple card. I love the way that it turned out. I particularly love all the white space and just the colors on those letters, I think is beautiful. So we'll move on to the second card. For this one, again, I had cut out the white cardstock at the same time as I did the background. And so for this one, I'm just going to heat emboss the letters only. This will not go across the back of the card panel. So I'm going to use the Post-it note tape as that straight edge, put on some Versamark ink. It's also a really nice handle for the letters for when you're holding it for the heat embossing. So we're using the same color, that platinum embossing powder. Just going to tap off the excess, put it on a couple times to make sure that you've got good coverage, and then heat emboss that. Initially, I was only going to do the bottom of the letters, and then I decided that I wanted to have a white stripe down the middle to kind of mirror the other card. So I went ahead and put the Post-it note tape down again, and I'm doing the top third of those letters. So here I'm going to add the sub-sentiment hugs from the Watercolor Dots stamp set. I'm inking this up with Versamark ink, and I'm going to heat emboss it in the same platinum embossing powder from Ranger. Unfortunately, because the background is a little more busy, there wasn't enough contrast between the platinum embossing powder and the background in order for it to be very readable. So I wasn't pleased with the finished product there. What I ended up doing was stepping away from the card for a couple hours to think about, I went and ran some errands and just to kind of think about, okay, well, how am I going to change this into something that I do like? So what you're going to see on the finished card is I took just a scrap piece of cardstock and stamped hugs again in black ink. I die cut that out with a circle from the Halftone Circles Die Set. I trimmed off the top above the hug so I could snug it up next to the N. And then I heat embossed liquid platinum stripe on the bottom. And that's the finished card set. I hope you enjoyed the cards today. If you did, please hit the like button below. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and blog at notableink.com. Thank you so much for stopping by and have a fantastic day.